History is full of brilliant people who made absolutely disastrous decisions, right? We see it literally everywhere. Executives totally bankrupting companies, genius engineers completely missing obvious flaws, incredibly bright friends making terrible personal choices. So, in this explainer, we're going to dive into this fascinating paradox. If these people are so incredibly smart, why are their decisions sometimes so remarkably bad? We naturally assume that a high IQ somehow protects you from making bad choices. We treat intelligence like this impenetrable shield. But as we're about to see through decades of behavioral economics and psychology research, that assumption is dangerously flawed. In fact, sometimes being highly intelligent can actually make you worse at decision-making. Why? Because your brain is just better at building complex, totally believable justifications for entirely irrational choices. But here's the thing. Intelligence and good judgment, they are not the same thing at all. Think of it like a computer. Intelligence is your raw processing power. It's your hardware. Good judgment, on the other hand, is the software you run. You can have massive processing power, literally the best hardware on the market. But if you're running terrible decision-making software corrupted by mental bugs and biases, well, you're still going to crash. Okay, let's dive into Section 1, the brain's dual wiring. To really understand the biology behind our bad choices and figure out how to upgrade that mental software, we've got to look at the groundbreaking work of Nobel laureate Daniel Kahneman. In his incredible book, Thinking Fast and Slow, Kahneman reveals that our brain doesn't just have one single way of processing the world. It actually has two competing systems that divide and conquer our decision-making. And the profound difference between these two systems? Well, that's where the trouble begins. System 1, that's your fast thinking. It's automatic, unconscious, highly emotional. It's the instinct that makes you slam on the brakes when someone jumps into the street. System 2 is your slow thinking. It's deliberate, it's effortful, and it's rational. Most of our daily mistakes happen simply because System 1 reacts instantly to save energy. It jumps to conclusions and relies on mental shortcuts without ever bothering to wake up the analytical System 2. Which brings us to Section 2, the illusion of certainty. So if our biology naturally defaults to this impulsive, fast thinking, how does that play out in a world that is just fundamentally filled with uncertainty? Well, enter former professional poker player Annie Duke. In her book, Thinking in Bets, she shows us that every choice we make is essentially a bet on an unfolding future. When you choose a career, make an investment, or even just decide what route to drive to work, you're placing a bet based on beliefs that, let's be honest, we rarely take the time to verify. The crucial point Annie makes here is that we suffer from this incredibly dangerous cognitive trap, something called resulting. Resulting means we judge the quality of our decisions entirely by how things turned out. If the outcome was good, we automatically assume the decision was brilliant. If the outcome was bad, we assume the decision was terrible. But in a world full of randomness and uncertainty, this is a massive trap. Take this extreme, but honestly, super illuminating example from Duke's research. If a CEO drives drunk, but miraculously gets home safely without hurting anyone, was that a good decision? Obviously not. Just because a terrible decision occasionally works out due to sheer blind luck, absolutely doesn't mean it was the right choice. And yet, we do this exact same thing in our careers and businesses all the time. We really have to separate our egos from the evidence here. We have to realize that life isn't like a game of chess where all the pieces are perfectly visible on the board. It's way more like poker. Outcomes are always a messy mix of skill and luck. This means perfectly good, highly rational decisions can sometimes have really bad outcomes. If you only look at the end results, you might end up abandoning a brilliant strategy just because you caught a bad break. Let's move right along to Section 3, Traps of the Mind. So, what are these specific bugs in our software that totally hijack our system when thinking? The ones that trip up even the highest IQs? Well, look at confirmation bias. We eagerly embrace any information that strokes our ego, and we actively ignore cold, hard facts that contradict what we already believe. Or consider the planning fallacy, wildly underestimating the time and effort a project will take because we are just so overly optimistic. And then there's loss aversion, where the sheer pain of losing something heavily outweighs the joy of gaining it, which causes us to hold on to bad investments or failing projects way, way too long. And behavioral economics research proves this beautifully. It shows that you can completely manipulate a highly intelligent manager's risk tolerance just by changing the words you use. If you frame a business plan as a gain, over 80% of people will choose the safe option. But if you present the exact same mathematical scenario, literally the same numbers, and frame it as a loss, suddenly those exact same smart people become risk-seeking and choose the dangerous option. Our brains are just incredibly easily tricked by presentation.
All right, section 4, questions before every big decision.
Okay, so if our fast-thinking System 1 is so easily tricked by framing, biases, and this illusion of certainty, how do we actually outsmart our own biological wiring? A fantastic solution comes from Michael Bungay Stanier in his book, The Coaching Habit. He points out that our brains are deeply evolutionarily wired to crave certainty. This drive pushes us to rush into giving advice, fixing things, or making super fast choices rather than just sitting with the uncomfortable ambiguity of asking a really good question. And this rush to certainty, it is absolutely devastating to decision quality. According to researcher Paul Nutt, who studied over 160 decisions inside organizations, when choices are framed as simple binary questions, like should we do this or not, they fail over 50% of the time. When we don't pause to explore our options, we are literally just flipping a coin with our success. Stanier argues that we absolutely need to tame what he calls the advice monster. And how do we do that? By asking more questions. By forcing yourself to say, what else? Or what's the real challenge here? You interrupt your brain's automatic, fast-thinking reflex. You literally force your slow-thinking, highly analytical System 2 to wake up and finally do its job.
And that brings us to section 5, rules for reality.
Let's synthesize all of this incredible source material into a practical framework, decision-making software you can literally use today. These 5 rules act as a circuit breaker for your mind. Rule 1, slow down to engage System 2. 2, actively seek opposing opinions to crush that confirmation bias. 3, think in probabilities, always remembering that outcomes equal skill plus luck. 4, separate your ego from the evidence so you don't fall into the resulting trap. And 5, always reflect after each major decision to extract the actual lesson. Annie Duke actually offers a brilliant, immediate way to implement this. The next time you are absolutely 100% certain about a choice or a fact, just ask yourself one simple question. Want to bet? Because if someone asked you to put actual hard-earned money on your belief, it instantly strips away that illusion of certainty. It forces you to step back, honestly examine your information, and realize, hey, I might not know as much as I think I do. Another incredibly powerful tool to take back control of your choices is the 10-10-10 time travel test. When you're faced with a really tough choice, just ask yourself how you're going to feel about this decision 10 minutes from now, 10 months from now, and 10 years from now. By mentally recruiting your past and future selves into the present moment, you totally bypass the emotionally reactive System 1, and you empower your choices to align with your actual long-term goals. Ultimately, the biggest takeaway from this explainer is that intelligence is just potential. It's raw horsepower. But structured, probabilistic thinking, that is what actually gets you to your destination. You do not need a higher IQ to succeed in life. You just need to stop letting your fast-thinking brain make your slow-thinking choices. You know, there's that great saying, good judgment comes from experience. Experience often comes from poor judgment. We're all human. We're all going to continue making mistakes. But by building a much better decision-making process, we can stop endlessly repeating those mistakes and instead extract maximum wisdom from every single failure. I would absolutely love to hear how these concepts apply to your own life. So take a moment to reflect on this question. What is one decision that taught you the biggest lesson? Really think about it, analyze it without any ego, and keep strengthening that System 2 thinking.